West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
What happens on Fox News in the U.S. affects the entire world. And the Murdoch media empire spans that world, as our viewers in the UK and Australia know all too well. In Australia, the former Prime Minister Malcom Turnbull ripped into Rupert Murdoch at a recent parliamentary proceeding. It is quite rare to hear someone of Turnbull's stature speaking out so bluntly against the Murdochs. So I wanted to find out why and what he wants all of you to know. Watch.
The Murdoch media empire has enormous political power. It is the most potent political force in Australia. It does not operate as a conventional news or journalistic operation any longer. Its influence in the United States, in Britain, in all of the countries where it is to be found is now utterly partisan. It is more like a political party, but the only members are the Murdochs. And as you know, it has driven populist right-wing agendas, denying climate change, supporting extremism on the right of politics, of populist politics, to the extent, most irresponsibly of all, you might think, supporting the proposition that Joe Biden had in fact stolen the election and was not legitimately elected president. And that, of course, was directly connected to the sacking, the assault, a violent assault on the United States Capitol, a shocking event and one of the darkest days in America's political history.
You, Mr. Turnbull, seem more disturbed by the attack on the U.S. Capitol than a lot of people here in the United States. A lot of conservatives are trying to deny what happened and pretend it wasn't that bad. But I appreciate that you saw it for what it was.
Well, it was an assault on democracy. It was, and you see, what Murdoch has delivered, largely through Fox News in the United States, is exactly what Vladimir Putin wanted to achieve with his disinformation campaigns, turning one part of America against another, so exacerbating the divisions that already exist in American society and undermine the trust Americans have in their democratic institutions. Now that was the objective of the Russian disinformation campaign, and that is exactly what has been delivered by Fox News and by other players in that right-wing populist media ecosystem. And it is, in effect, what they have created is a market for crazy. They've become unhinged from the facts. It is now basically, they've worked out that you can just make stuff up. Everyone talks about and complains about social media, but what is being done by curated media mainstream media, including and in particular Fox News, has done enormous damage to the United States. I mean, the question you have to ask yourself is America a more divided country than it was before, thanks to Murdoch's influence? The answer must be yes. Do Americans have less faith in their electoral institutions and their legitimate institutions of government as a result of Murdoch? Yes. Now, that is a terrible outcome. That is a terrible outcome.
You said Murdoch's created a market for crazy. I've never heard anyone say it quite like that before. A market for crazy. And if this clip is re-aired on Fox News, they'll say, you're insulting all of Trump's supporters. You're insulting all of conservative America. And they would say that's going to harm your cause. Have you thought about what the right way or what the most effective ways are to combat the so-called market for crazy?
Look, when somebody tells lies and spreads misinformation and you call them out, you are calling out the liar, not the people that have been taken in by the lies. They're the victims, right? So, Murdoch has to take responsibility for what he has done. Politicians take responsibility. They come up for election every few years. The power that is exerted by Murdoch, and in such a partisan way. I mean, I've been involved in the media business most of my life, since the mid-70s, early 70s, in fact. And, I grew up with newspapers that some of them leant more to the left, others more to the right, but they basically reported the news straight. And on election day, they would say, vote for this party or vote for that party. Fair enough. What you now have with Murdoch, and you see it with Fox News, so Americans don't need, an Australian to tell them this, but what you see now is just undiluted propaganda.
Fox CEO Lachlan Murdoch has relocated near you. He's relocated to Sydney or thereabouts. And so I wonder why you think that is, and whether the two of you should get together and try to hash this out.
Well, look, I've known Lachlan Murdoch for many years, and I've spoken to him and his father about, in fact, I know pretty much all the family. I've spoken to both of them about these issues in the past. I would say that Lachlan is more right-wing than his father, more extreme. And I think that the bottom line is they enjoy the power. A lot of people assume that people are attracted to power simply for the purpose of doing something. That's a very generous assumption. But many people in the media, in business, in politics, are attracted to power for its own sake. And asking them, why do you want to exert this power, is like saying to somebody, why do you want to have sex? It's an urge. It is so the power, the influence, that is what turns them on. And it's very, very dangerous. I mean, I saw the relationship between Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump. I have never seen a politician as deferential to Murdoch as Trump was. It was clearly a very symbiotic relationship. Murdoch knew very well, I know this, he knew very well what Trump's shortcomings were. He didn't think he was qualified to be president, but once he thought he could make him president and have that influence over him, but to what end, he did so. And so you ended up, again, where did you end? You ended with an assault on the Congress. You ended up with a country where a third, so I recently saw of the public, believe that Biden was not legitimately elected, in defiance of all the facts and all the reality. Now that is the type of outcome that Vladimir Putin could only dream of having achieved. But it was done by Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan and their organisation and they are not held to account at all, but they should be.
And speaking of the Murdochs, the family divide is starker than ever. Lachlan's younger brother, James, who left the family business in disgust, signed an open letter this week defending democracy, defending voting rights. Meanwhile, Lachlan defended Tucker Carlson and dismissed the ADL's call to action after Carlson invoked the racist white replacement theory.
It is Monday, the 19th of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Yes, a weekend has just transpired, and here we are on Mondays, ready to begin again. Fortunately, it wasn't like the last 4 years, from that other guy. They call him the former guy. I think he's still a guy, but he's the other guy, the one in the past that we'd like to forget, but we better not. Well, the weekends are much nicer in comparison, aren't they? Even though the Nazis are really trying to keep their fight going. They want their Reich, and they're going to get it. Speaking of Reichs, I mentioned on the Tim Corrimal show that Marjorie Taylor Greene's racist caucus, the KKK caucus, the Anglo-Saxon caucus, well, it lasted about, they were a 1,000-minute Reich, which is, what, around 16 hours, a little less? Not even a Scaramucci. A tenth of a Scaramucci. All right, well, I think they'll just rebrand. She is confusing the Normans for the Anglo-Saxons. I wish these people would get their racist history right. My God. But, what do you expect? They being of her generation, and I will say that many in our own generation, and you know who we are, we're not required to take civics, let alone pass it, to get a diploma. And this is the direct result of the lack of civics in our educational system, and that was by design. Up until, the mid-70s, a little bit after, civics was required to get a diploma. Well, at least, let's put it this way. Across the board, up until the early 70s, it had been required, and it stopped being required pretty much by the beginning of the 80s. They took their little sweet time, about 10 years, to phase it out. It is funny how the property tax issue came about around the same time. And what did property taxes do? Paid for education. Feature, not a bug. So now we have the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Berberts, and the Oath Keepers. Yeah, they got their little Reader's Digest pocket size, their breast pocket constitution. It's a Reader's Digest type. They leave out quite a bit. So the cops are training the Oath Keepers. I'm shocked, because the Oath Keepers around here were all cops, and they were happy to announce it. They would have meetings at the diners. Oath Keeper meeting on Thursday, come on down. You don't hear very much about them and with their public proclamations now. But if the cops in, just a couple of years ago were so at ease announcing that they were Oath Keepers, because we have constitutional sheriffs in office right now in Oregon, but they don't announce it very much anymore. I wonder why. Because they know the law could catch up with them. But we have a problem, don't we? When we talk about defunding the police, I think what that really means is let's purge the police of all these Nazis and racists. We're not talking about getting rid of the police. We're talking about getting rid of the police that are Nazis and racists. We're not talking about getting rid of law and order. We're talking about getting rid of the Nazis and the racists. And excuse me, they do not have a constitutional First Amendment right to be Nazis and racists. Okay? All right, I know I'm ranting like I always do, but I got to get it out. It's Monday. Pent up. I've been pent up over the weekend. How dare these Nazis and racists tell us what to do? Already, there were 190 companies that said, we will not donate to this insurgency. We will not give campaign contributions to the insurgents of the GOP because of what happened on January 6th. And now, slowly, one by one, scores now have decided to go back against that oath. And they are now donating campaign contributions to the insurgent Nazis of the GOP. And when I say Nazis, I'm not being hyperbolic. I am stating a fact. There's no other word for it. I know some people go, oh, they're all totally American grown, the KKK. Well, the KKK, in my book, are Nazis. They're just, a faction of Nazis. Useful idiots at the very least, shock troops to go out and beat the crap out of people, intimidate. And that's what this politics is. How do you reach across the aisle and shake hands with that? No, you slap them across the face. Punch a Nazi. Oh, that's so violent. Well, look what the hell they're doing. Okay? Anybody cottoning to it, and I don't mean that as a pun necessarily, Tom Cotton, you Nazi. What are they? Who are these people now who say at One American Network? There are staff members, employees at One American Network who say, "Oh, we had mortgages to pay. We had bills and rent. we had to work here. We didn't agree with all of this Nazism that they're trying to promote." Well, you know what you call people who are just doing their jobs while the Nazis took over? Well, the whole thing was the banality of evil, of course. But what do you call people who either naively accept the Nazi takeover, encourage it, but then their excuse is always, I was just doing my job. I had bills to pay. What do you call those people when the Nazis take over the government and they just let it happen? You call them good Republicans. We have moved from the good German to the good Republicans. And that will be my meme. You're just a good Republican if you were just doing your job. Well, I have refused many a job, and I've walked away from many a job. In fact, I've walked out on dinners with women who turned out to be racist. Yeah, I paid. I didn't make them pay or anything, but still. There's nothing sexually exciting about that. In fact, it's a turnoff. I've walked away from jobs that were morally incorrect. Oh, I'm just doing my job. I have to do it. I will say that I've been in jobs that I thought had a certain level of evilness, but I thought maybe my presence might change it in some way, some small way. Maybe it was only a justification to get the paycheck. I'm only here to make it better. Maybe. But sometimes people have to set their foot down. And you don't know how to set your foot down if you don't know the civic history of these United States. Who takes civics anymore? Who is required to know the Constitution? I remember when they started phasing it out. Well, we're phasing out the bigger issue of the civics course. We'll just teach the Constitution. So then it became you had to pass the Constitution test. And then they got rid of that because people were knowing a little bit too much about their government and how it works. So we have a Marjorie Taylor Greene confusing the Normans with the Anglo-Saxons to promote her white racist belief. Oh, God. Where is the intellectual heft on that side? There is none. As if there was any to begin with, but at least they tried. What's on the rest of the menu here? You know, I could, I suppose, just keep going on and on and on, but I better get to the curated part, because we do have some order within the construct of this show, indeed. Well, at the top, another reason why we have the destruction of our society and our government is because of Rupert Murdoch. And it's great that Malcom Turnbull, former Prime Minister of Australia, along with Rudd, you got a liberal and a conservative saying we got to do something about this Rupert Murdoch. He is an evil man. He needs to be stopped. Yeah, but they're still up to it. You got Tucker Carlson. It looks like Lachlan is saying, hey, you know what? The replacement theory is making us money. See, that beggars the other question. Marjorie Taylor Greene brings in this gigantic haul of contribution funds. Now, is she going to share it with the rest of the Republicans? Because it looks like McCarthy thinks she will. That's why he's like not completely condemning her, because Rupert and Taylor Greene are bringing in the big bucks. That's why they are the Nazis. It is the closely wedded aspect of a military mindset government with business. Okay? That's why they are Nazis. On the rest of the menu, a pandemic Good Samaritan faces a hefty tax bill for his efforts. Yeah, well, that's what happens. Do something good, you might get slapped. As mask mandates end around the various states, Oregon bucks the trend with a permanent rule, and people are not happy about it. And you know who they are? Yeah, the usual suspects. And faith leaders across the country are asking corporate executives, I'll get it out, to condemn voting restrictions or face a boycott. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Czech Republic is expelling 18 Russian diplomats over charges that Russian intelligence blew up an ammunition depot. And Spanish police raided a factory making 3D printed weapons. Now on the international arms market. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. And Kelly Lincoln monitors that chat room. Thank you, Kelly, and for everything else that you do as well. If you would then look across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left, you will find our link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring contribution helps us pay our bills. Yes, indeed. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds to us once a month, we put those funds with the funds that we pull out of our own wallets, and we pay those bills. We fly under the radar, and we continue resisting as we have for the last 10 years. Yes, it is our birthday this year. 10 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio, as the founders originally intended. And we thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a whole lot more too. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and then post that up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. You're not going to find them on the shelf at Target. You won't. Well, at least not now. Yeah, we'll find out later how that distribution process will be. This first offering comes out of the Associated Press here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it looks like anonymous staff wrote this article. A Connecticut middle school teacher who raised $41,000 to help hundreds of his struggling neighbors during the COVID-19 pandemic got an unwelcome surprise for his charitable efforts, a form stating he could owe $16,031 in income taxes. You know, they're not going to go after the people that owe millions, hundreds of millions. They won't go after them. Why? Because that takes effort. But they will go after the little fry. Louis Goffinet, age 27, of Mansfield, Connecticut, began picking up groceries for elderly neighbors afraid to go to the store during the early days of the pandemic, often spending his own money. Given the great need, he later organized 2 fundraisers on Facebook over a year and helped hundreds of families with groceries, rent money, and holiday gifts. The Hartford Courant reported setting a $200 limit. He asked for $200. He got $41,000. Goffinet said both financial support for his efforts and demand for assistance ended up becoming higher than he first expected. He tracked 140 grocery trips on a spreadsheet, noting he also provided Friday night dinners to 125 families, holiday gift cards for 20 families so they could buy gifts for their children, 31 Thanksgiving dinners and rental assistance to 5 families, and some local businesses even donated food. It became dramatically bigger than I thought, he said. My original goal was to raise $200 to help one family with groceries. I was already doubting myself when I set that up, that people in town are not going to want to pay for someone else's groceries. In January, Facebook sent Goffinet a 1099 form that stated he owed taxes on the money he had raised. Facebook warns users that money generated from a fundraiser on the social media platform may be taxable if more than $20,000 is raised, and that a 1099 tax form will be issued. I was so shocked, Goffinet told the Courant. When I think about the mental spot I was in at the end of January, coming off a second fundraiser that was quite a lot of work, busy weekends, coordinating Thanksgiving, holiday gifts, to get what I perceived as a bill in the mail for $16,000 was just shocking. Goffinet is now working with a local accountant to determine how best to handle the situation. His bill is due on May 17, and he expects to pay some sort of tax burden, but is not sure exactly how much. Meanwhile, some people in the community are now trying to help him out with the tax bill, so far sending $2,000 in checks to a post office box, not through Facebook. Sarah Klein of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. As states around the country lift COVID-19 restrictions, Oregon is poised to go the opposite direction, and many residents are fuming about it. A top health official is considering indefinitely extending rules requiring masks and social distancing in all businesses in the state. The proposal would keep the rules in place until they are, quote, no longer necessary to address the effects of the pandemic in the workplace, end quote. Michael Wood, administrator of the state's Department of OSHA, said the move is necessary to address a technicality in state law that requires a permanent rule to keep current restrictions from expiring. We're not out of the woods yet, he said. But the idea has prompted a flood of angry responses, with everyone from parents to teachers to business owners and employees crying of government overreach. Wear a seatbelt. Okay? Is that government overreach? It must be. Wood's agency received a record number of public comments, mostly critical, and nearly 60,000 residents signed a petition against the proposal. Opponents are also upset government officials won't say how long COVID-19 case numbers must go, or how many people would have to be vaccinated to get the requirements lifted in a state that already has some of the nation's strictest safety measures. When will masks be unnecessary? What scientific studies do these mandates rely on, particularly now that the vaccine is days away from being available to everyone, cried State Senator Kim Thatcher, a Republican from Kaiser near the state's capital. Yeah, right next door, actually. Businesses have had to play mask cop for the better part of a year now. They deserve some certainty on when they will no longer be threatened with fines. Stop fighting them. Open up, Oregon. Well, you know what? If you guys had washed your hands, socially distanced, wore a mask, and stopped denying the fact that we're in a pandemic, we wouldn't be here, would we? Hey, these whiners. Wood said he is reviewing all the feedback to see if changes are needed before he makes a final decision on May 4th when the current rules lapse. Oregon, a blue state, has been among those with the country's most stringent COVID-19 restrictions and now stands in contrast with much of the rest of the nation as vaccines become widely available. The problem is that we have a spike in infection rates among all rural counties, and all rural counties are Republican. At least 6 states, Alabama, Iowa, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota, and Texas, have lifted mask mandates, and some never implemented them at all. In Texas, businesses reopened at 100% capacity last month. And look at their infection rates. In January, Virginia became the first in the nation to enact permanent COVID-19 workplace safety and health rules. While the end of this pandemic is finally in sight, the virus is still spreading, and now is not the time to let up on preventative measures, Democratic Governor Ralph Northam said following the announcement. Besides mask and distancing requirements, Oregon's proposal includes more arcane workplace rules regarding airflow, ventilation, employee notification in case of an outbreak, and sanitation protocols. Wait, those are arcane? Please. It dovetails with separate actions issued by Democratic Governor Kate Brown using a state of emergency declaration requiring masks in public statewide and even outside when 6 feet of distance cannot be maintained, and providing strict county-by-county thresholds for business closures or reductions in capacity when case numbers rise above a certain level. More than a third of Oregon's counties are currently limited to indoor social gatherings of 6 people, and the maximum occupancy for indoor dining, indoor entertainment, and gyms is 25% of capacity, or 50 people, whichever is less. And many schools are just now reopening after a year of online learning, and they're also closing because of infection outbreaks. Funny how that works. Amid pandemic frustration and deprivation, the issue has gained a lot of attention. A petition on change.org opposing the rule gained nearly 60,000 signatures and spread on social media, drawing even more interest to the proposal. More than 5,000 public comments were sent to the agency, smashing his previous record of 1,100. And you just know that Vladimir Putin is rubbing his hands in glee over that. Justin Spaulding, a doctor at the Cataract and Laser Institute of Southern Oregon, is among those who raised concerns about the proposal in public comments. Let me just tell you, Southern Oregon is Southern Oregon because, there are sundown towns here. It's very racist, very Republican. So you would expect somebody from a laser and cataract business to whine. Oh, the imposition on us. We have to wear masks. Well, you know what? If you're doing surgery on me, you better wear a mask. I don't understand these new guidelines for business, the guy from the Cataract Institute, Spaulding, said. If we put these into effect, we will only continue to blunt the recent drop in business. Well, I don't know. You could, maybe. If you're vaccinated and wear a mask, you'd make house calls. Maybe. Officials said they have every intent to repeal the rule, and that decision will be made based on a complex mix of factors, including case counts, vaccination rates, case severity, and advice from the Oregon Health Authority. It will be a complicated assessment when we do it, Wood said. And I would say it is impossibly complicated to do in advance. Jonathan J. Cooper and Emily Leshner of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In Georgia, faith leaders are asking corporate executives to condemn laws restricting voting access or face a boycott. In Arizona and Texas, clergy have assembled outside the state capitals to decry what they view as voter suppression measures targeting black and Hispanic people. It's not just in their view, but I understand the reportage. Okay. Similar initiatives have been undertaken in Florida, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio, and elsewhere, as many faith leaders perceive a threat to voting rights that warrants their intervention in a volatile political issue. It is very much in part of our tradition as Christians to be engaged in the public square, said Reverend Dr. Eric Letterman, a pastor at University Presbyterian Church in Tempe, Arizona, after the event outside the State House. Well, you got like some snake dancer Christian types prancing around with snakes and talking gibberish, saying that we have to overthrow the government. So when are their tax exemptions going to be pulled? I wonder. When people say, let's not get political in the church, Jesus was very political, Letterman said. He was engaged in how his culture, his community was being shaped, and who was being left out of the decision-making process. Georgia already has enacted legislation with various restrictive voting provisions. More than 350 voting bills are now under consideration in dozens of other states. And among the proposals, tightening requirements for voter IDs, reducing the number of ballot drop boxes, and curtailing early voting. African Methodist Episcopal Bishop Reginald Jackson, who oversees AME churches in Georgia, has been urging corporate leaders to do more to fight voting restrictions. So far, he's dissatisfied with the response and says he may call for boycotts of some of those companies. We'll see if it threatens them enough, especially since these companies are now donating to the insurgents who tried to overthrow our government. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, let's talk about Zack, baby. To talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League, it's best just to talk about Zack Snyder, the filmmaker, because at 4 hours and 2 minutes, we have his largest canvas to date on which to see him work his mojo. So without joining his haters or his defenders, let's just step back and look at his style and talk about its effects. Zack Snyder does not hide his director's hand. He overtly uses a number of filmmaking techniques, like disruptive focus adjustments, muted colors, monochromatic palettes, and most notably slow motion. So what's he about here? Well, unlike me, Snyder is not about speed. He does not want to rush you along, which makes him an interesting choice for directing action films. Just sitting with these images that he so carefully constructs can feel like waiting for engines to kick in, but digging a Snyder film means surrendering over to his sense of time. Even in his non-affected scenes, like when Batman finds Aquaman, there's a sense of threat and foreboding, but not of urgency. And I think the slow motion thing is just about visuals. We slow down on the Flash's run not because it's important for Flash to be in the moment, but because it's important to Snyder for us to see Flash in this moment. Snyder rarely uses slow motion to provide insight into character, because character is another thing he is not into. He has characters who face a struggle, usually having to escape from something or defend against something. In doing so, they employ technically impressive savagery, which usually allows them to succeed, although not in a pretty way, their moral shadiness echoed by Snyder's chromatic shading, which again makes him a surprising choice to adapt a collection of our biggest, goodest heroes. Anyway, that's it. Snyder doesn't give much character development. Clark, Bruce, Diana, Arthur, Barry, they're all pretty much the same people at the end of Justice League as they were at the beginning. But their final battle is really well plotted. So, is Zack Snyder's Justice League worth its hype? 4 hours will tell you. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Some birds are relatively easy to study. Ross Crates studies the ones that aren't. He's part of the Difficult Bird Research Group at the Australian National University.
All our study species are quite challenging to study for various reasons, mostly because they're really rare and highly mobile.
One of those difficult birds is the critically endangered Regent honeyeater. They're medium-sized songbirds with bright yellow tails and black and white chests. And though they once roamed Australia in flocks of hundreds, fewer than 300 remain in the wild today. Crates and his team tracked the birds over a 5-year period. If they encountered a male, they'd record his song. And they noted whether the males were paired up with females. They found that a quarter of the birds sang variations of the traditional honeyeater song, and 12% of the birds weren't singing honeyeater songs at all. They were parroting different species songs, like this. Or this one. That could mean bad news for the bird's future, because males singing those untraditional songs were also less likely to be paired up with a mate compared to their counterparts who sang the standard tune.
As females breed less, then there's obviously fewer males in that generation to teach the next generation. Higher proportion of males sing weird songs, and you get a bit of a positive feedback towards extinction.
The work appears in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Crates says the honeyeater's loss of songs equates to a loss of culture.
It's a complete sort of animal equivalent of the loss of indigenous languages, whether that be Native American languages or Aboriginal Australian languages here.
He says he hopes it serves as a warning that all is not well in Australia's natural world, and that we must do more to tackle climate change and conservation if we hope to save it. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This is the last time for this introduction to the Civil Liberties Minute.
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
As Attorney General under President Lyndon Johnson, Ramsey Clark filed desegregation and voting rights cases in the South and the North. A fierce opponent of capital punishment, he ordered a moratorium on federal executions and banned wiretaps and stopped federal prison construction and required adherence to the Supreme Court's decision in Miranda and helped draft the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. In private practice after the 1968 election, Ramsey Clark represented the disadvantaged and war resistors and inmates at Attica during that historic prison rebellion, and Sheikh Omar Abdelrahman, convicted in the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. He would represent the despised, including persons accused of war crimes. Ramsey Clark believed in the right to counsel and the obligation of a citizen to speak out when our country violates its principles, and he remained true to the core principles of freedom. As he said, a right is not what someone gives you, it's what no one can take from you. The recent New York Times headline told this sad story. Ramsey Clark, Attorney General and rebel with a cause, is dead at 93.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day Edna Sauls and 38 women walked into the Virginia headquarters of the Pittston Coal Group, sat down in the lobby, and sang "We Shall Not Be Moved." Their occupation lasted 36 hours. The women were mostly relatives and friends of the 1,700 union miners on strike against Pittston. The women, when questioned by police and the media, refused to give up their names. They called themselves the Daughters of Mother Jones. Though Sauls had never worked in the mines, 6 of her brothers and 2 of her sisters had. She and many family members would sit down in front of Moss 3 preparation plant just weeks later. As the strike wore on, her husband Doug would be one of the union strikers who took over and occupied Pittston's Moss 3 plant later that fall. Sauls noted the high personal stakes at Pittston, stating, "My husband is 42 years old. He's worked in the mines for 24 years. Who is going to hire him for another job?" Sauls also rose to local fame during the strike when she began writing strike solidarity songs. One such song was "Let Me In," also referred to as the camo song for the strikers who wore camouflage. Sauls composed the song after she found a child crying whose striking grandfather had been jailed. In the song, the child asks to go to jail too. The daughters picketed Pittston offices twice a week and organized strike support that included housing, food drives, and fundraising. Their role inspired miners to occupy the mines and roads, persevere throughout the winter, and eventually win back health benefits. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be considerably cooler than yesterday, where we topped out about 94 degrees yesterday, expecting only a high of about 75. Now, that's how people catch pneumonia. Don't do that to us. It will be a mix of clouds and sun throughout the day, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, partly cloudy skies overnight with a slight chance of a rain shower. And we would like that, indeed. And looks like lows will be in the mid-40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies tomorrow, with highs only around 70, winds out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Oh my, it's picking up. And we do have a forecast for a considerable spot of rain towards the end of the week. We'll see if that stays true, because you know how weather forecasting is. The confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 9,846, and we've increased our deceased total now to 127. These are not full totals over the weekend. We'll get those either later today or late tomorrow. So, unfortunately, we've been getting 70 to 130 infection cases reported a day. And everybody wants to take off their mask, apparently. Everybody wants to rub shoulders against each other in a confined space, even though the pandemic rages on. Come on, people. It looks like, No pollen is registered outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 27 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 5. Better slather on the SP50. That's what I've been doing. SPF 50. All right. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.22 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 77%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 62 and sunny. Paris is 63 and sunny. Rome is 53 with rain. Kyiv is 53 with light rain. Kabul is 62 and fair. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 58 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 61 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jan Lopatka of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Czech Republic is expelling 18 Russian diplomats over suspicions that Russian intelligence services were involved in an ammunition depot explosion in 2014. The Central European country is a NATO and EU member, and the expulsions and allegations have triggered its biggest row with Russia since the end of the communist era in 1989. Its actions could prompt Russia to consider closing the Czech Republic's embassy in Moscow, a diplomatic source cited by Russian news agency Interfax suggested. Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babis said in a briefing shown live on television that there was a well-grounded suspicion about the involvement of officers of the Russian intelligence service GRU in the explosion of an ammunition depot in the Verbitis area. Several explosions shook the depot about 205 miles southeast of Prague in October of 2014, killing 2 employees of a private company that was renting the site from a state military organization. Babis called the circumstances unprecedented and scandalous, while a Russian lawmaker described his allegation as absurd. The U.S. Embassy in Prague said that Washington stands with its steadfast ally, the Czech Republic. We appreciate their significant action to impose costs on Russia for its dangerous action on Czech soil. Acting Czech Foreign Minister Jan Hamáček said the 18 Russian embassy staff, identified as Secret Service personnel, will be ordered to leave within 48 hours.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A replica assault rifle, small arms, several gun barrels, 2 tasers, and a machete were among the arsenal seized from a Spanish factory discovered to be producing 3D printed weapons, police said yesterday, Sunday. Officers raided the illegal weapons workshop in Santa Cruz de Tenerife in Spain's Canary Islands and arrested the owner, who has been charged with illegal possession of weapons and explosives. The first such factory to be discovered in Spain also contained working 3D printing equipment that could manufacture gun barrels in only 2 minutes. There were also manuals on terrorism, urban guerrilla warfare, and how to make explosives at home using a 3D printer, as well as white supremacist literature and a pistol holster with the symbol of the German army during the Second World War. A specialist team of dogs from the police's TEDx bomb squad sniffed out chemical substances that could be used to make explosives, the statement said. Police also found 9 ammunition magazines, 2 silencers, 2 pieces for rifle barrels, and a plastic mold to make triggers, sights, and other small weapons parts. The operation took place on September 14th of last year, but has remained secret by order of a judge, as often happens in Spain, until police were cleared to release the details yesterday, Sunday. Looks to me like they're rounding up some more criminals in this enterprise. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. tea.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.